Chapter 5. The Wild West. During the 19th century, more and more people went to live in the west of the USA. The Wild West that you can see on television and in films is full of cowboys, Indians, and fighting. In fact, there were very few cowboys, no more than 40,000. And real cowboys did not shoot each other or fight Indians very often. They worked hard at their job, taking care of the cows, and at least a quarter of them were black or Mexican. They took cows from Texas up to the railway towns in Kansas and Missouri. From there, the cows were sent to Chicago and killed, and the meat was sent to the east and sold. The cowboys almost disappeared after about 30 years because the government gave the land to farmers and their families. From 1862 to 1900, more than 500,000 farmers came to live in the West, where they made new farms and grew food. One family that moved west was the Ingalls family, whose daughter, Laura Ingalls Wilder, told the story of their journey in books like Little House on the Prairie. Life for these farmers was very hard, particularly in winter. The farms were very lonely, but soon the railways helped to bring people together. In 1869, the railway line from the east met the line from the west in Utah. So then Americans could travel right across the USA by train. Before the railway, from 1860 to 1861, the post was carried across the country by the famous Pony Express. Horses and riders waited at different places. One man rode with a bag of letters for about 120 kilometers and then gave it to the next man. In this way, letters only took about 10 days to cross the country. One very well-known rider was Buffalo Bill Cody. He later became a soldier and a hunter. They say that he shot 4,280 buffalo in 1 year. In the 1880s, Buffalo Bill started his Wild West show, a kind of traveling theater, with the famous cowgirl Annie Oakley. Chapter 6. Native Americans. There were about 2 million Native Americans in North America in the 15th century when the Europeans arrived. They belonged to 300 different groups and spoke more than 2,000 different languages. Sadly, the Europeans fought and killed many Native Americans and also brought diseases which killed them. The film The Last of the Mohicans, from the book by James Fenimore Cooper, shows the sad end of a group of Native Americans in the 18th century. The Native Americans that we know as Indians in cowboy films lived in the West. They were the Cheyenne, the Blackfoot, and the Sioux, also known as Lakota, for example. There were about 60 million buffalo in North America, and the Native Americans hunted them and used them for food, clothes, houses, knives, and other things. But when the Europeans arrived, they wanted to take the land for farms or railways. They shot millions of buffalo, and by 1900 there were fewer than 1,000 of these animals in all of the USA. And fewer than 250,000 Native Americans. The great Sioux chief Sitting Bull fought against the white men who wanted to move his people from their own land to Indian land further west. He won an important battle at Little Bighorn in 1876, but could not win the war. The Indian Wars ended in 1890 with the Battle of Wounded Knee, when American soldiers killed many Sioux men, women, and children. After this, Native Americans had to live in special places called reservations. Even today, about a third of the 4.4 million Native Americans live on reservations. They are often very poor, and a lot of them do not have jobs. So they sometimes drink too much alcohol in order to forget their problems. Some Native Americans build casinos where people can go to win money from cards and other games, and this brings in money for the reservations. Other groups refuse to do this, and also do not allow alcohol on their reservations. Many of the big reservations are in the Southwest, the home of a different type of Native American. Among the people of the Southwest are the Hopi and the Zuni. They keep sheep, make pots, and also make beautiful jewelry from silver and blue-green stones. Their religion is very important to them. Their dancing often has a religious meaning, and they make beautiful religious pictures. The biggest reservation, where 200,000 Navajo people live, is nearly 65,000 square kilometers. The Navajo make wonderful colored blankets. The Navajo language is very unusual. During the Second World War, the American Army used Navajo soldiers to send secret radio messages that the enemy could not understand. Chapter 7. New Americans. At the beginning of the 19th century, most American families had come from Britain, Germany, and Scandinavia, and they were farmers or business people. But soon that began to change. Factories were built, and cities grew. Poor people arrived from other countries hoping to find work. Between 1840 and 1900, about 5 million people came from one country, Ireland. Another 5 million immigrants came from Italy, and millions more from Russia, Poland, and other countries of Eastern Europe, hoping to find jobs and freedom. America kept an open door until 1924, and about 27 million people arrived between 1880 and 1930. They were often poor, had different religions, and had not been to school for very long. There was a lot of prejudice against them. Immigrants from Europe arrived at Ellis Island in New York, where they were all checked for disease and for other problems. Close to Ellis Island is the Statue of Liberty. Liberty means freedom. On it are these famous words: "Give me your tired, your poor." The statue welcomed the poor, tired immigrants who hoped for a happier life in the USA. The Chinese immigrants who arrived in the west of the USA also found prejudice. Many people came to live in California after gold was found there in 1848, and among them were 300,000 Chinese. Many of the Chinese stayed to work, building the new railways. Like black people and Native Americans, the Chinese had no civil rights, and after 1882 they were no longer allowed to enter the USA. But in the 20th century, Chinese people started to arrive again, and now the cities of the West Coast have large numbers of Chinese families. The writer Amy Tan tells stories about life as a Chinese American in The Joy Luck Club and other books. Today, most immigrants to the USA come from Spanish-speaking countries like Mexico and Puerto Rico. More than 6 million have arrived since 1980, and Spanish has become the second language of the United States. The Irish, Italians, and Eastern Europeans usually stayed in the big cities of the East or the Midwest, like New York, Boston, or Chicago, and worked in the factories. Although most of them learned English and became Americans, they also wanted to keep their own way of life. So in many cities, you can find places called Little Italy or Chinatown, for example, where the restaurants have Italian or Chinese food. In New York, Boston, and Chicago, St. Patrick's Day is a big celebration for the Irish on the 17th of March, and Chinese New Year is a big celebration in San Francisco.